Hope you're all doing very well. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about my Trek Checkpoint SL and all the specs and bits that I've added to it over the years. Gravel biking in the UK has grown in popularity, especially as a lot of people don't want to be on the roads, and it is far more enjoyable being off on country lanes and bridleways and gravel paths away from all the traffic. It just makes the ride so much more enjoyable. But with an array of bikes out there, everyone's thinking, what bike should I get? What should I do this? But I want to talk about my experience with the Checkpoint, how I've been riding it over the last couple of years of owning it. But before we get into that, I'm Dan and I like to escape on my bikes and do other adventures. If that's something that you're interested in, then please do hit that like button and subscribe to my channel, as it helps a lot and I appreciate it so much. So this is my Checkpoint SL5. It is Trek's gravel lineup, the Checkpoint. It comes in an ALR and also an SLR form. I've opted for the SL, and this originally started life as an SL5. And the only original parts that are still on this bike are the frame and the forks. Everything else on this bike has changed, and I'm going to go through what changes I made, why I made them, and then also at the end I'm going to talk about what it's like to ride this bike. So we're going to start off with the cockpit of the bike and then work our way to the back, excluding the group set. I will leave that till last because I've made quite a few changes over the years. Starting off with the handlebars, I'm not running gravel bars. I adopted the approach of running some aero road bars. These are the RSL aero bars. They were quite new to Trek. They have a slight flare to them, so they've got 39 up top and then a 42 on the drops. I have these also on my Trek Emonda, so if you haven't seen that video, then you can click up somewhere above here. I really love these bars. I was originally riding them on this first and then added them to the Emonda, just simply because I really like them. They're very comfortable to hold, especially up here. I don't feel like I really need the wide gravel bars. Those are for some crazy descents, and when I have been on some gnarly descents, I haven't felt like I needed any wider bars. You know, it felt very in control. That's why I opted for a 39 up here and 42 on the bottom. On my Emonda, I've actually got 37 up top and then 40 on the bottom. So I've gone for a narrow bar on the road bike. But on here, I've gone for a little bit wider for a little bit more stability. I'm running an RSL stem. This is one thing about the Checkpoint. It is quite a longer bike. When it originally came, it came with an 80mm. This is a 70mm stem. That's the thing, you kind of want to downsize if you're looking at a Checkpoint, and I opted to make that change right at the beginning. When I first got this bike, it came with an 80 and I felt really stretched out. But since riding a lot more, I could probably go back to an 80 if I needed to. I've also slammed it a little bit more, so I can't remember how many spaces I got here, probably about like 20mm spaces. One thing with the cable routing on this is the bars are only designed for Di2 electronic shifting or SRAM axis, but I'm currently running mechanical and I've managed to get 2 cables in here, which was a nightmare. I don't recommend doing it if you have the opportunity to upgrade to these bars. Just go for electronic shifting, because yeah, trying to route 2 cables in here was a nightmare just because how small the holes are. Also, the routing of the cables into the headset can be quite tricky. That was a bit of a nightmare. They're all a bit of a tanglement at the moment, so I kind of messed it up when I was doing it. I'm also running the blender mounts on here, so I've got one for the Bontrager light and also one for my Wahoo up top, so that sits nice and flush right in the middle. So as for wheels, I've gone for the Bontrager ALS Pro 3Vs. These are kind of a gravel set wheel, so it's got a wider internal width, so it means you can run wider tyres. They roll really well. I've ridden them down some really rough stuff. They've taken quite a beating from what I've ridden on, and they've handled up pretty well. The only downfall probably of these wheels is the inside bearings. I've had to change them already. They were quite rough. Maybe that's my fault because I didn't really service them well, and that's something you should always check on your wheels, is how often they feel rough and should you be servicing them regularly. Obviously, especially running off-road, that's something you should do. For tyre choice, I've gone for the Pirelli Cinturatos Gravel M. This is their mixed terrain tyres, and to be honest, these are probably the best tyres I've ever ridden. The original tyres that came with the bike were the Bontragers. I kept getting punctures with those, and I wasn't too happy with the grip on them, especially going off in the UK gravel, which has a lot of mud. These mixed ones have some deep lugs, but also they have this fine line in the middle, so it helps with rolling resistance on the road surfaces. I had originally the 40s on, so 700 by 40s, and I was riding them for well over a year and never had a puncture on them. I'm running these tubeless, so I've got the silica sealant in there at the moment, so if I do get any punctures, hopefully that will deal with any of those. But, you know, I just never have any punctures with these. I'm now running the 45s for a bit more comfort and squish, and also a bit more grip, especially in like the muddy terrain and some technical descents that we've done, especially when we did the South Downs. I switched over to these and they handled really well. As for the forks, this is why a lot of people go with the SL version. It's because you've got all these mounting points up the fork, so you can put bags on there, you can put bottle holders, so it means you can attach stuff really easily to this bike if you want to do long bike packing stuff. So as for seat post and saddle, I'm running the Bontrager RSL seat post. It's a lightweight carbon post. Had no problems with it. I've got a 0mm offset, so usually you can get these in a 20mm or in a 0mm. This is running the 0mm, mainly because I mentioned that the bike was quite long, so I didn't want to add any more reach by putting the seat 20mm backwards. Saddle I'm running is the Bontrager A-less Comp. I was running the RSL, but I've moved that to my Monda now. I kind of wish I had the RSL back on this, but they're currently out of stock, so until they come back in, I'm running the Comp version until then. So why I went with the carbon version over the aluminium version was it has ISO speed in here, and I know this has been an issue that's plagued Trek for a while, especially in their Demanis. But in the checkpoint, it seems to work very well. I've never had any issues, touch wood, with it so far. I've been down a lot of rough terrain with this bike and it's handled it so well. But it also adds a little bit of comfort and takes out a little bit of the vibrations when it comes to those rough terrains that you're riding down and you're sitting on the saddle. So it was a much welcomed upgrade in the carbon version. So if you are thinking between the ALR and the SL version, it might be worth doing it just because of having that ISO speed there. Another difference I wanted to talk about with the SL frame over the aluminium was you do get this little storage cubby in the down tube, which means you can keep a flat kit inside here, keep some bars, I keep some inner tubes as well. Just generally quite handy, especially if you're going on those backpacking adventures and you want a little bit of extra space to hide things so it's not taking up your bags, then this is very handy to have. I've got two side loader cages on here. So I've got one right one and one left one for the back. That means that if I do have a frame bag in here, I can easily get the bottles in and out rather than having a top loader which will hit the top of the bag. As for pedals, I've gone with Shimano XT SPD pedals. So they have a cage on them and they're typically made for like downhill mountain biking, meaning it protects the clip-in mechanism, so from any rock strikes or anything. I don't know why I went with these originally. I thought that it would be easier to pedal on when I've got just normal shoes on, so that's probably why I went with it. I really enjoyed them. I haven't needed to change them out. If I was going to, it'd probably just go for the smaller XTR versions just to make it super light, but I love having double-sided clips because it means, especially when you're off-road, it's easy to clip in and out of. So coming back onto the rear wheel, this is exactly the same as the front, the Bontrager ALS Pro 3V. The only difference is obviously it has a rear wheel driven hub. That means it has the Bontrager Rapid Drive 108 engagement. So that means it has 108 engagement points. So it means there's less play in the free hub. So when you need to put down that power, it's got almost, I wouldn't say exactly instant engagement, almost instant engagement because you've got those 108 engagement points. That means it's got 6 pulls inside and it sounds something like this. So I'm not a really big fan of loud hubs. The only reason I have them is purely for that quick engagement. I have tried to pack quite a bit of grease on there just to try and silence it a little bit. Okay, so when it comes to group sets, I've decided to take a seat because there's a few things to unpack here. It originally came with a GRX 600 and it was running a 2x, so it had 1134 in the back and then a 2x up front. I've since changed that to 1x and I've gone with the GRX 810. This is a 42 teeth up front and I've still got 11 speed, so I had to change the derailleur for a longer cage one, so it meant I could put a bigger cassette ratio in the back. And I think on this one I've got 11 to 46. This has helped massively with those climbs. If anything, I wish I would have changed the crank length. It does come with a 172.5, and that was what I was originally running with the 600s. Ideally, I would have gone down to 170, even considering 165. Not because I find it uncomfortable and I find it too long. It's mainly because of pedal strikes. There's been a couple of occasions, especially when going up technical climbs, that I've hit rocks and fallen off. So as for the bottom bracket, I switched to the XT15 at the end of 2022. Been riding it the whole of 23, and recently at the end of 23, I decided to service it, and it felt beautiful at the end. I took out, cleaned them out, put new grease in, and it works beautifully. Can't fault it. Considerations, I was looking at going to the GRX 820 with the 12-speed and then running the Mahusive 52 cassette on the back, which would help with those very technical climbs. There was a few on the South Downs that we did that I could not get up, and I was begging for those bigger gear ratios, but unfortunately I didn't have them, and I don't have the leg power to power through. A few things I have considered is it worth going over to SRAM or waiting till GRX bring out an 820 Di2 version, which would be amazing. It would probably be called the 825. I think if that came out, I would switch to that. Also considering maybe doing a mullet conversion. So the good thing with SRAM is you can run a mountain bike derailleur on the back and then pair it up with the shifters, which is quite handy. So when I shifted over to the 1x and the new derailleur, I still kept the 600 levers and brakes, and they worked well. I couldn't fault them. I didn't need to change them, so there was no point in doing so. But recently I found a bargain on the 812 shifters and brakes, so I decided to switch them over. Is it 812 or 810? There's so many different numbers in Shimano's lineup that I always get confused. But yeah, so now I'm running the full group set, and then also running some XTR brake disc rotors just because they look cool, a bit lighter. Yeah, that's the whole setup of this bike. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is there anything you would change? What would you do? Other things to mention is I have ride wrapped this bike. I put a clear wide wrap on it, especially as I was taking it off-road a lot, and it has helped a lot because there's been times where I've heard chunks of rocks just come up and smack the frame, and I can't see any scratches. There is one issue where it is peeling underneath the fork, so I need to decide what to do with that, whether to peel it off and then put a new layer in, which I probably will do, but at the moment I've just left it dangling, collecting mud. So as for how this bike rides, I love it. I really enjoy riding this bike. A lot of people are a bit like, oh, it weighs quite a lot, and admittedly the SL version does, and there's not too much of a weight difference between the SLR, but from what I've heard from people's other experience going from the SL and racing with that and then switching over to the SLR, there is a massive difference. But for me, I liked the SL version, having all these mountain points up here, having a traditional seat post, which means if I wanted to later on, I could run a dropper post in there. I don't know if I ever will do, but it's handy to know that if I needed to, I could put a dropper post. Gravel bikes now these days are tending to go towards more of like a cross-country mountain bike, and if you are thinking about putting suspension on this bike, putting suspension in the seat, suspension stem, then maybe you need to question, do I need this bike, or should I go to a mountain bike and even put drop bars on a mountain bike? Well, cross-country mountain bike, that is. Yeah, I really love this bike. I think I've been on quite a lot of rides with it, and yeah, just really enjoy it, especially with the Pirellis. Got that nice grip, and also the puncture protection is pretty decent on that. I really enjoy riding it, and I'd recommend you get one. And coming back to my previous statement about it being quite long, that is something that I recommend you do test out. Go to a shop where you can try it out and maybe looking at downsizing rather than going for your direct size. I'm riding a 54 here and ride a 54 in the road bike, and you know, I kind of do wish I went down to the 52 in this bike, but you know, I've made it work for me, and you know, I found it very comfortable now. I found a good position where I'm sat in, and yeah, I can't complain. But yeah, let me know in the comments below, what kind of gravel bike are you riding? What do you think of my setup? What kind of changes would you make? Would you run SRAM over Shimano? There's so many different questions. What do you think of these Pirelli Cinturato tires? But yeah, that's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, as it helps a lot and I appreciate it so, so much. Hope you're all staying safe, staying positive, having fun, and I shall see you in the next one. Come around.